This is The Science of Self, a podcast brought to you by Newton Media Group and Peter Hollins. This is Monday, October 4th, 2021.
Polymath. Master multiple disciplines, learn new skills, think flexibly, and become an extraordinary autodidact. Learning How to Learn, Book 9. Written by Peter Hollins, narrated by Russell Newton. Standing on the shoulders of giants. As the now popular maxim goes, we can see far if we stand on the shoulders of giants. Even if our own efforts are small, when we add them to the collected understanding and knowledge gained by the great thinkers who have gone before us, we can advance further than even they did, and in a sense, continue their journey. It's important to thoroughly understand your own strengths, weaknesses, context, and goals. If striving for polymathy in your own life is important to you, there's no other way but to approach it with your own unique idiosyncrasies and curiosities. However, there are countless giants who have come before us. In looking at high achievers from history, we can find patterns, inspiration, or encouragement. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Admittedly, you may see that the Polymaths we'll investigate in the pages below were mostly born into wealth and were well connected, if not literally nobles and aristocrats. Many of them lived so comfortably that they were able to devote themselves to learning instead of survival, and more than a handful were noted philanderers, substance abusers, and gamblers. Nevertheless, there are some lessons we can learn from these figures, even though our lives are very different from theirs. We can make historical and cultural adjustments and learn from these giants how best to apply our own talents to arrive at the modern-day equivalent of a historical polymath. The original Renaissance man. Leonardo da Vinci, born in 1452 in Tuscany, Italy, is arguably the most famous and accomplished polymath in the history of the world, as well as someone recognized for massive creativity. Science, math, the arts, politics, culture, history, you name it, and he cultivated an interest in it and likely gained a level of proficiency. His list of accomplishments is staggering, and the variety of fields he mastered is beyond belief. Anatomy. Da Vinci reshaped what human beings knew about themselves. He was the first person to create detailed views of the internal organs of the human body. He made casts of the brain and ventricles from a deceased ox, paving the way for such models of human organs. He was the first to describe the S-shaped structure of the human spine. He completed numerous dissections of both human and animal bodies, meticulously documenting and drawing everything he saw. Imagine how valuable those diagrams were, coming from someone so artistically skilled. Even today, Da Vinci's many illustrations of human anatomy are still necessary studies. Innovation and invention. Da Vinci's foresight was incredible. He came up with drafts of several inventions that were finally brought to life almost 500 years after he lived. The helicopter, the parachute, the military tank, the robot, and scuba gear all sprang from ideas first put forth by Da Vinci. And that's just a partial list. He had a particular interest in military and defense inventions, and biographers have speculated that his various artistic endeavors were only meant as stopgaps so he could find more work in warfare. Architecture. Da Vinci was fascinated with large-scale construction projects and served as a consultant to builders of his time. He designed a system for canal locks that wound up being extremely close to the types that are used today. He even dove into urban planning with his conception of the ideal city. Art. Da Vinci painted a couple of masterpieces you may have heard of, the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. His iconic Vitruvian Man drawing of the human body is as much a piece of art as a scientific explanation. Da Vinci also revolutionized the use of landscapes in his art and was an early innovator in the use of oil paint. He was a sculptor as well. Science. Da Vinci's expertise made him a key figure in the development of studies in several different sciences. He was the first to speculate that fossils would prove that Earth was far older than those of his time believed. His detailed depictions of plants influenced how botany was studied. He made investigative studies on the motion of water. He designed mills, machines, and engines that were powered by water. He even designed a musical keyboard that played bowed strings. Occasionally, he slept, we can assume. The inventor of the German language. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was a celebrated German writer and polymath born in 1749. He wrote lauded dramas, poems, novels, and an autobiography, as well as participated extensively in botany and human anatomy. On top of all this, he was an accomplished statesman and political figure, and was ennobled by the Duke of Saxe-Weimar before the age of 40. As was common at the time, Goethe received a classical, well-rounded education, where his father encouraged him to embrace languages, including Greek, French, English, Latin, and even Hebrew, among others, as well as a thorough physical education that included horse riding, fencing, and dance. He originally studied law at Leipzig, but disliked it hugely. His real passions were drawing and literature. In later life, Goethe devoted himself exclusively to writing. In his 70s, however, he met frequently with the child musical prodigy Felix Mendelssohn, and helped him become recognized by comparing him to a young Mozart. Goethe himself inspired many of the great composers, and was known to have a lifelong love for music. Today, Goethe is considered a national German treasure and requisite reading for any education in literature. So extensive and impactful was his work that he is frequently referred to as having invented the German language. Literature. Goethe gained enormous recognition for his two early novels, Götz von Berlichingen in 1773 and The Sorrows of Young Werther in 1774. These books were so influential they've been called the first bestsellers, with Goethe being identified as the founder of the literary movement of Romanticism. This movement still has effects on the way we think of literature and poetry today. If people recognize the name of Goethe, however, they often associate it with his best-known work, Faust. Later in life, he wrote Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, which the philosopher Schopenhauer believed was one of the 4 greatest novels ever written, high praise indeed, as well as some plays and his own fable. In his late 60s, Goethe dabbled with poetic Orientalism, proving that a true polymath never stops learning, discovering, and changing. Botany and physics. Goethe is best known for his immense literary impact, but he was a prolific writer in the sciences too, devising optics experiments and a color theory of his own that went directly against the Newtonian framework. For Goethe, light was to be understood relativistically and not mechanically, and his intimidatingly large Theory of Colors treatise explains how he believes color is perceived according to the way our nervous system interprets it, not because of factors in the external environment. Today, physicists understand that both environment and individual perception are important in color perception, but perhaps Goethe's real achievement was in being courageous enough to question and challenge dominant theories of the time. We can still see philosophical echoes of his theory in modern disciplines today. Goethe was also an accomplished scientist in his own right and did research in botany, geology, psychology, and meteorology, setting the stage, according to some, for the later development of modern-day weather forecasting technology. He made a noteworthy anatomical discovery about the intermaxillary bone that went against conventional scientific knowledge at the time. Goethe was known, even in his time, as an autodidact and Renaissance man, never for a second believing that his literary talents should exclude him from looking deeply into matters of medicine or anatomy. Politics. Goethe's literary successes won him some celebrity and wealth, which, in many ways, landed him in the court of the Duke of Saxe-Weimar, where he soon climbed the ranks and earned successive titles and greater social liberties. He was, at one point, the war commissioner and for a short while the Chancellor of Saxony. That's where the von in his name came from, a title and rank equivalent to being a prime minister today. He managed the development of roads, oversaw the maintenance of mines, and even participated in certain noted tax reforms of the period. Goethe was never a retiring and whimsical artiste, but an active and powerful member of his social world.
That excerpt is from Peter Holland's book, Polymath, Master Multiple Disciplines, Learn New Skills, Think Flexibly, and Become an Extraordinary Autodidact. The audiobook is available now on Audible. Check the show notes for links, as well as a link to Peter Holland's homepage, where you can request his free mini ebook on 7 psychological studies that will change the way you think. And finally, if you have a question or comment regarding the podcast, you can email the show at hollandspodcast@newtonmg.com or drop us a comment at bit.ly/hollandscomment. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.